Welcome back, everybody. Now we're going to jump into the demonstrations component of the SNAG Tides and Waves West Africa Symposium. The demonstrations component will be led by Matthieu Cheminée, who shares demonstrations on filigree by Guinean jeweler Ibrahima Condé, the making of a gold-plated biconical pendant by Modou Fall Tall from Senegal, casting with Tuareg jeweler Ghabda Oummama, and other crafts from artisans in Niger. He'll also touch on his experiences working with jewelers in West Africa and how these collaborations transpired. Before we begin, I would like to read a little bit about Matthieu Chimney and also give a thanks to our sponsor for this particular presentation, Schiffercraft. Thank you so much, Schiffercraft, for sponsoring this particular presentation. And also thank you to our other sponsors for this particular symposium. Thank you so much for this work. Um, Now we're going to dive into some words about Matthieu. Matthieu Cheminée, at only the age of 19, moved from Paris to New Mexico, where for 7 years he learned jewelry techniques. He immediately took to stamping, a technique he has been using in his work ever since. Then he moved to Mali, West Africa, and worked for years with Fulani, Tuareg, and Bambara jewelers. In 1999, Matthieu settled in Montreal, Canada, and continued his studies by going to a jewelry school and learning the more classical part of the trade. Over the years, he has been returning to Africa regularly to work and research techniques. He has been teaching at the École de Jolie de Montréal and at the École des Matières du Sud-Ouest in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. He also teaches workshops in Canada, the United States, and abroad. Matthieu is a Salle Bell Award winner, has pieces and collections at the Musée des Matrices et Artisans du Québec, Montreal, Canada, and Musée des Civilisations de Québec, Canada, and is the author of Legacy Jewelry Techniques of West Africa, The Art of Stamping, and Indian, The Mastery of Tuareg Artisans, or in Inadan, The Mastery of Tuareg Artisans. In 2021, he opened his own school/studio in Montreal, Quebec, Canada. He is also the co-founder of the Toolbox Initiative, along with Tim McCrate. Toolbox Initiative is a non-for-profit organization that helps jewelers in West Africa through the gifts and donated tools. We're about to dive into Matthew's presentation, and following Matthew's presentation, we'll have a Q&A on the main stage moderated by myself, and we'll also have Matthieu here to answer questions. See you all.
Hi, my name is Matthieu Cheminée. I'm a jeweler in Montreal, in Canada, in Quebec. So West Africa, how it all happened for those videos. So what happened is when I was 25, 26, I moved to Mali, West Africa. And I stayed there for 3 years, mostly in Bamako, the capital. And I just walked the street for 3 years, really, discovering jewelers. Often I say I walk and listening to the sound of the hammer. So I will actually hear somebody forging and go to that jeweler and spend time with them, and always were very welcome. And so that's how I really started to work in Africa. And I met jewelers that introduced me to other jewelers, and also that's how I met a lot of Tuareg jewelers. I spent a lot of time in the Tuareg camp just outside of Bamako, just sitting all day long for months at a time, just watching and talking and learning, and it was just fantastic. And so for 3 years, that's all I did, really. I worked as a photographer at the same time to make a little bit of money, but mostly learning techniques, and always welcome in shops. So after those 3 years, I moved to Montreal in Canada, and I did a jewelry school to learn more I would say, classical part of the trade. But every year I will go back to West Africa to just to visit friends and to visit different country. And so friend I met in Bamako, some Tuaregs, they were from Tombouctou or from Niger. So I will go to Niger and work with family member of my friend. And so you know, slowly it just became like a snowball, and learn more and more techniques, and met more and more people. So that's how it really started. And every year I will go once or twice to West Africa and to meet new people and learn new technique. And I was fascinating with those old technique, and so I wanted to preserve them, because through the time I spent in Africa, I see how some of them just disappeared because, you know, it took too long, or there were a conflict or stuff like that. So I decided to try to get as many techniques as I could, and I wanted to do some kind of a book, not mostly for younger generation in West Africa. So I started recording videos and recording pictures of the technique of friend over there. And when I was ready, I called Tim McRae and I said, would you be interested to publish a book on technique in West Africa? And he was right away into it. And during the process, I needed one more technique, and I needed to go to Senegal. So I asked Tim if he will come with me. And so he came for that technique. And that's how, during the trip, we created the Toolbox initiative that support jeweler in West Africa. So that's how it really started and happened. Then during the pandemic, I wanted to, you know, I was at home and I thought, I was always fascinated with the Tuareg culture and the Tuareg artisans. So I thought I'm going to do a book on Tuareg artisans. And I thought I had plenty of image and picture, and so I just could do it. But as soon as I started to look into it, I realized I didn't have much. So I got the idea to send iPhones and smartphone to few friends in Niger and Mali and Senegal. And so we had a talk and see if they were interested to actually become the photographer on site. And so they did a lot of the picture. So jeweler took the picture for the book of their family member. That's why it's so rich and so powerful. I don't think anybody could have done better than somebody on the spot. So it was really a fantastic experience. So we did mostly with Mohamed Ajida Hada, we did the movie on the Ifirwan cross. We did a lot of pictures of all the techniques, so camel saddle, swords, anything that the artisan will make, leather bags, but then when we were done, and I was actually working on the text for the book, I wanted more. It was still the pandemic, so I wanted Mohamed to keep and make him an income. So I hired him to do movies, and I figured, you know, with the movie, I could maybe one day do a show like today, how it's done. So he did a lot of movie on the technique. And Mohamed is a fantastic jeweler, but also a fantastic photographer, turn out, and makes beautiful films. So we still work on new projects like that. So that movie is really done by Mohamed and with family member and friends, and it's just you know, the eye from inside is much stronger than if any outsider will come and do a movie. So I find it very rich because of that. So Mohamed always likes to bring scene of what's going on. And here's the camel market in Agadez with Camo going to his shop. And so the lost wax casting, Camo is one of the master in Agadez, and he does mostly wax casting. So here he's in his shop next to his house. So it's a little tent, and often work with his wife there, who does leather work. So he gets beeswax at the market. Usually the beeswax is from Nigeria, so it's imported from the forest region in Nigeria. And so he has a block of beeswax that he keep using and using. So that's why it's a little bit dark as a wax. It's been used many times over. And so we always start by forming the cross by hand. So it's all done, just by knowing the shape perfectly. And there is about 24 crosses, and he does all of them like that. So right now he's putting water on his anvil and hammer so it doesn't stick to the wax, and he's just making a perfect sheet of wax out of the shape he just made by hand. And then starting carving. So now he's doing the symmetry for both sides, and he's just gonna all do it by eye and carving with a little tool they make. It's a little piece of steel that is hammered into a blade. And the other side is also a smaller blade to remove other part of wax. We can see there is flies around, and it's mostly because he works outside, and often next to the tent there is the sheep and a camel he owns. So of course it attracts some flies once in a while. I just love the perfection of every movement and how delicate he holds these tools, and just usually, the video shows the making of it like that. It probably takes him 20 minutes to really carve the perfect wax model like that. You can see in the background the anvil. It's the Tuareg anvil is just magical. It's from a car axle, and it's hammered from the top to make that square piece. And it's anchored into a piece of wood, usually a V-shaped piece of wood from a branch. So when you hammer it, the anvil in it, it doesn't crack. It's just because the two fiber from the branch and the trunk just mix there. So he hammered the anvil into the wood and then bury the wood underground in the sand so it doesn't move. So right now he made a small sheet of wax and cuts it into pieces so he can add another dimension to the piece. So it's going to be a little bit thicker at the bar there. So on both sides, he adds a little piece of wax. I've seen Camo does it as well, probably, but another friend, Mohammed. So what he does is when he makes a cross like that, he actually, at this point, he put two cross together. And so he carved both at once. So two pieces of wax that he kind of stick together, and he carved the two at once. So it goes a little bit faster. So now he starts with making the circle. This circle is, they don't add a loop or anything to the cross. So the leather cords or whatever is going to hold the cross around the neck goes through that circle. And so it starts with a small circle and slowly opens the circle to the size he desires. So now he's working on, he makes a little shape, like a conic shape, 3 conic shape that's going to be add at each end at the bottom of the cross. So now with this other side of his tool, he's just making a little hole so it fits perfectly at the point. So for now, it's just sticking together, pressure fit. Later on, he's going to solder it by heating up his tools and touching the joint. So he adds the 3 parts on it. Then he's going to add a bigger part at the end of the cross, which is actually the top of the cross. And that is his sprue for casting. So that's where the metal will enter the mold. And once in a while, he'll just put the cross in the water to harden it, to harden the wax if need be. So now he just put his tools on the charcoal, and so it's just a little warmer, and then it can easily solder every joint to make sure those pieces hold together. And so you can see on this picture, and that's why we call our association the Toolbox Initiative. It's every jeweler has a little box, and he has two here. And so every jeweler in West Africa have those boxes, and that's where they put their tools and take it back at night. And here's the cross finished. So now he's going to put a mixture of clay around the cross to create the mold. And that clay is a mixture of clay, sand, and a fiber. So often the fiber is a donkey dung, because the way they digest the grass makes the perfect fiber. So, but if you don't have any donkey around, what they use is burlap bags, and they put it in water and just hammer it to break all the fiber and mix it with the clay. So he's making a little cone at the top of the wax to this way when he pours the metal, it's easier. The thickness of the mixture on the wax is about 1/4 of an inch in general, maybe sometime a little bit less, but not much less than 1/4 of an inch. And of course, in the Sahara, this dries quite fast. But in general, you'll leave it a day in the shade, not in the sun, because in the sun it will crack much easier. So now he's going to make a crucible with the same mixture, so he can melt his metal and pour it into the cross. And so this will dry for usually a day, and before the next step, where he's going to actually melt the wax inside the mold. So the forge, the bellow, is made out of sheepskin. It's a full sheepskin, and so when he opens like that, he fills with air, and then he close it up and push the air under the charcoal. And so very slowly, he's just going to melt the wax and keep it. So now he's pouring the wax in water, and he's going to do that a few times until there is no more wax. Then he's going to add a little bit of charcoal and do the burnout. So really heat up the mold so all the wax inside gets burned out. So now he's adding his crucible with silver in it. And often the jeweler will work with pure silver. And he put his mold on top because the mold needs to really be hot when it's going to be poured in. So now he's really going at it to melt the metal. It usually takes like 5 minutes, not even, and the metal is melted. He's making a little hole in the sand next to him so he can stand the mold inside that. So now he's removing the mold and set it up in that hole and fill with sand around so it holds straight, and he can pour the metal. So you can see when he pours the metal, he always have a stick. So the stick, it helps to remove whatever piece of charcoal that is left in it, but also to get the crucible very sturdy when he pours. So you always let it cool a little bit before very slowly putting it in water. Because inside it's still very, very hot. And now just breaking the mold. And here's the fair wine cross in silver. The mold is used once. Also, they can do, sometimes they put 3 or 4 crosses next to each other with a little separation so they can cast few crosses at the same time. So he's removing the sprue with a chisel, and he starts by reforging the shape of the cross. Now he's reforging the little conic shape at the end. And then comes the filing. So the filing takes quite a long time to really clean it up. It's probably the longest part of the cross making. It's to file all the lines and you know, even the texture of the clay on it. So it's a lot of filing. And so the Tuareg anvil, as you can see, there is a little hole in one of the corner. And on that little hole, you can add a little anvil, or in that case, he was adding a piece of wood so it doesn't mark the cross. Right now he's using his bigger hammer as an anvil, so he can really reach the center of the cross. But on that little piece of ebony that he puts in his anvil hole, this doesn't mark the cross, and you can just file on it. So this little hole is made to add smaller anvil or different things. And often, you know, if the jeweler is right-handed, because the hole is on the left, and if the jeweler is left-handed, the hole will be on the right. So now now that the filing is down, he set up himself to do the engraving. So always with a little stick of wood to hold the piece and couple nails so it doesn't slide around. And often they use the old screwdriver or just a piece of steel that's been sharpened into like a V shape to be an engraver. And there's 3 different techniques to engrave. So right now is just, when he moves his hand like that, he's making a line. But when he just point and lift, he's making little triangle, like right now. So it makes almost like a diamond cut look alike. So he's doing 2 crosses at once. That's why we see the cross on the side, but now he's also adding few stamps, circle on the cross. And those decoration on the cross is really traditional. So they're always the same looking decoration. And each engraving has meaning. Often it can represent the well at the in a village. It can represent the camel marks in a desert, the different kind of meaning. So now that the cross is finished, we're going through, I added a few videos that Mohammed did on other craft. And here is one of his uncle making a camel saddle. And it's all there is few parts in wood. I mean, the frame is all wood. So now he's doing the back, this is the back. Yeah, I believe it's the back of the camel's saddle. And his wife next to him working on weaving baskets. So often, you know, the artisan, the Tuareg artisan are called inadon. Oh, sorry, it was the front of the camel saddle. I just blank. So the Tuareg artisans are called inadon, and the women artisans, because the wife of the jewelers or of the artisans are artisans themselves, and they do leather work or they do weaving baskets and other things. So they're called tinadon. And so now they're using raw hide, like a hide of a sheep that's been killed recently. So a sheep or a goat, and it's fresh, so they can make tie with it. And so when they tie the pieces of wood together, and when it dries, it's so strong that it can never move again. So now all the pieces are tied together, and it's going to become just so strong when it dries. And so sometimes they also heat it up to burn the whatever air are left on it, but also to dry it a little bit faster. And of course, we're jumping a lot of different steps, but when the wood is dry, when the rawhide is dry, leather is added all around. And you can see on the handle on the side, there is clay also added. So there is part of clay and part of leather and wood to just make different shapes on the saddle. And now is working on the brass piece for decoration. So this is going to be on the back of the saddle. There's going to be a piece like that on the back and on the front. And he's adding pieces of white bronze. So white bronze is actually a piece of very thin bronze, and on it is melting tin solder to make it white. And so it's a lot of addition of different material, like very thin leather, white bronze in the back for decoration, nails. Sometimes there is he added cow skin, so the white hair on it, and different bronze and brass pieces all around, and the point in the front. It takes a couple weeks to make one of those saddles. So of course I just jumped few of the part. But the making of the saddle was done mostly for the book, and then Mohammed did the movie on it, which is I think so fantastic to have. And here's the saddle finished. Here is Mariama. So Mariama is Mohammed's cousin, and she does leather work like most of his family member. His sister, his wife, his mother, his grandmother, they all do leather work. And this is called an enafad. It's almost like a wallet you wear around the neck. And this one is a big size one, mostly done for ceremonies and wedding and different, so people wear it around their neck. But every day they'll wear a smaller one around the neck. On this video, Gumur is making a chariot. So a chariot is a grigri. A grigri, if it's grigri, is more like a talisman. So it's a beautiful piece of jewelry, but inside of it, he's going to put writing from the local imam, or and to protect the wearer. So he starts by actually shaping. He's gonna. You can see on the anvil he added another little anvil, a square one, and by hammering on with an angle on it, he actually raises the metal. And those chariots can be raised 2 or 3 steps, or even 4 steps. And it's just, when you see it in person doing it, it's really unbelievable, the control there is, and that just perfection of a shape on it. And Gumo is one of the best for that in Agadez. And that's another thing that Mohammed did for the book or for the videos, is just he found always the person that know that technique the best. So he really went further and just always found the perfect artisans for every piece. And so now he's raising the second level. And this one is going to have two levels. Then he's going to actually fold over the side. So it's going to look like a 3-level piece. Now he's he's just folding the sides over. So it looks like a 3, almost like pyramid on top. So the center part is raised in a piece of lead. It was just hammered with some kind of a stamp on it. So it's a repoussé, but with a stamp, not with a hammer, that part. And of course, now goes the engraving, which is really the Tuareg signature. And often for the sanding, so the sanding takes quite a while. Often it's given to a younger apprentice. And you can see that there is a flip-flop glued to a piece of board, so it doesn't move and it doesn't hurt the piece, and it's just sanding. And you can see there's children around, and so very early on they start playing with the tools, and that's how they really start their learning experience in a way. So here he put the piece of paper where there is writing from the imam on it to protect the wearer, and then he's going to back it up with piece of cardboard until it's totally full, the box. And he's going to add the back to it and fold over the edge of the back to close it in. Yeah. Mm. Huh. So now he's closing it in. And the piece that's left on the top is going to be rolled into a tube. And inside that tube, he puts a wire. And in this case, it's an aluminum wire. So you can add the strap to it. And here's a woman wearing it. Okay, so the next video we're going to see is a video on filigree. And it's it happens in Guinea, in the capital Conakry. With a jeweler named Ibrahima Condé. I met Ibrahima Condé, wow, a long time ago, probably 20 years ago in Conakry. And we've been working ever since. Ibrahima mostly makes filigree, so he's really a master at his craft. Unfortunately, today he has problem with his eyesight, so he cannot do it anymore. But here it's in his shop in Conakry, in the capital. So we'll see him a little bit work. You'll see at the beginning, to melt the metal, they use a bellow, handmade bellow, or sometimes sand cast bellow. This one is maybe even imported from Europe, but sometimes they import some from Europe that they sand cast to make local copies. And we're going to see the video and I'll talk about it. So here is Ibrahima's shop. There is two jewelers next to each other. And here is the bellow I was talking about. So it's fabricated locally, and it's the wheel of a tire where they make the fire. They also, use piece of wood to melt the metal and to do an ingot. Ibrahima he had this very old rolling mill since the Toolbox Initiative brought one for him, but the gear are just dead, but it worked perfectly. So he always starts by making the frame. And again, he used pure silver, so it's more malleable. And so now he's making the frame out of a little, it's a round wire rolled flat. And the frame has to be a little bit higher than the filigree itself. So this way it protects all the little pieces. So he's putting the two pieces together and solder. So he makes his own solder. It's always a mix of pure silver with a little bit of bronze. Sometimes if he wants easy solder, he add the zinc. So he twists a very thin wire. It's about 0.4 millimeter. And he twists them between two pieces of wood. It makes the perfect twist for filigree. And then the twist is flattened for the filigree. If it cannot be round because the solder will not hold the pieces together. And so there is different ways to do the filigree fillings. Right now is just rolling a little ball at the end and then curves it a little bit to give the space and then cuts it. So he always spends time to cut hundreds of pieces before he starts. And then when he has pieces, he doesn't have to make them, he just choose what size he wants to create the filigree. So now they're all put one at a time. And you can see sometimes he's going to press the piece against the frame to give a little bit more spring to it. And he starts in both directions for this one. So they just meet in the middle, the left and the right, one after another. And they're just going to hold perfectly inside the frame. And it's always critical for the last few pieces because that's what makes the whole piece all together. So right now it's holding, there is no solder. And he's going to do the second side very similar. And it's just enough pressure, too much pressure and everything jump out. So it always needs really the perfect pressure. And now he's making his solder. So he's adding a little bit of zinc to it. So it melts a little bit faster than the one for the frame. He's hammering the solder ingot into a piece of wood so he can file it. So with a magnet, he removes whatever little piece of steel there could be from the file in it. And he uses flux, which is just borax and water all over it. And he's going to put the solder powder in the back of the piece. So what was laying on the flat, so it's always in the back, and now he's just soldering it. And what he used for soldering is it's gasoline soldering torch. So it with a pump, he press and it takes oxygen that take the fume of the gasoline, and that's how it's solder. And now he's forming it and he's going to solder the back, and then a little bit of cleaning and the ring is done. Okay, so the next video, it's a beautiful piece from Senegal. It's a really classic piece that actually very few people still make today. It's a double cone pendant, and it's some kind of granulation decoration on it, and it's plated in gold. This one. And it's done by Modou. Modou Fall is a jeweler from Pekin. Pekin is the outskirts of Dakar in Senegal. Modou is a good friend, but he's actually a very good friend of a good friend of Bamba Cafe. And so Bamba introduced me to Modou. And when he was doing that pendant, Modou was actually working for someone in Pekin. And so we could not go to his shop. So he came to Bamba's shop in Dakar, in the Subidian village. And so that video was done in Bamba's shop. And so there's, it's really again, what I love, it's almost like a dance when you see Modou work. It's so concentrated. And Modou does mostly old technique. So a lot of filigree and a lot of granulation. So we'll see that piece is quite amazing to see the way it's done. So it's a piece after being plated. So always starts with wire, and like for filigree, the wire is rolled between two pieces of wood, but this time it's not flattened; it stays round, and so that way it looks like when it's rolled between the wood. So Modou started already, just cut two pieces for the two different cone shapes. And then we start by adding those twisted wire next to each other. And he made little jump rings out of twisted wire as well. And so sometimes what he'll do, he'll just take a little bit of flux and so when it dries, it all the pieces in place. As you can see, the jump rings are in a little spoon with some flux, and it's just slowly adding all the pieces. Put a layer of jump rings and some more wire frame it. Just light rolled and tap to make it really perfectly straight, all the little pieces. I'm always amazed. I mean, even with all those years, how everything is done with no measurement, just everything is by eye. And, you know, I'm always with my caliper in my workshop measuring everything, and it's still not as perfect. So now it's half jump rings. So he made jump rings that he cut in two to add a little bit more decoration. So far, nothing is soldered. It's all laid like that on the piece. And with a little bit of the borax with water mixed, so the flux, it as it dries, it holds it enough for him to keep working. I remember this piece, it took a full day. Modou came in the shop and probably around 10 in the morning, and we were the last one out of the artisanal village. It was probably 9 at night. So, and of course there is break in between, but still it really was a day work. And yeah, it was really interesting to see him, the way he just pulled that wire. Yeah, it's something. And again, it's pure silver. Now he's gonna set it on the board that he can warm up, heat up, and he's just gonna heat it up lightly for the flux to dry, and then it's all gonna hold even better together. At the same time, he's working with smaller cones to make earrings. So right now he's working on the earring part. So over that newspaper, he's cutting very fine little pieces of pure silver. And so he's putting few wire together and just cuts tiny, tiny sliver of it. And that's going to become the granulation, but it goes through a process. So this is charcoal that's been pulverized in a mortar and pestle, and he adds, so it's wet. It cannot be dry. If it's dry, all the pieces will actually melt together. So it's wet, and he mix in all the little pieces of silver, and then he packed it into a metal crucible, and it's in the forge for at least 10 to 15 minutes, and it gets really, really hot. So again, if the charcoal would have been dry, all the pieces actually find each other and become a big piece. But because it was wet, when he actually empties the crucible, all those pieces became perfectly little balls for the granulation. So now he's removing all the leftover charcoal, and he's got all his granulation, and now he has to select them by size. So what he does is takes a matches box and open very little and shake. And so all the same size fall out, and the bigger ones stay behind. And again, like Ibrahima earlier on a filigree video, he made an ingot of solder that he files to use the powder. And then the powder of the solder is mixed with borax, and then it's going to be added over the whole piece. So the borax and the solder together. So everything will actually solder all the wire. By doing that filing, it goes into the twist of the wire and make it very strong as well. So not only it attach the twisted wire to the piece, it makes the twisted wire itself very strong. And so now with a tiny little spoon, and the little granulation are set in borax and water, and with a little spoon, he's going to really set them everywhere it needs to. So that it was already night. So now he's working sometime with a flashlight. With a little paper, he's going to remove whatever excess water. So just by touching a corner, it just suck the water out of the piece. If not, everything will just jump out. So when it's dry, it just is going to solder it. So now it's drying without putting too much oxygen. So the oxygen is controlled by a pump again. So, and now it's just soldering everything and adding a little bit of powder on it. So everything gets soldered together. Cutting the excess of metal and filing before it's going to form it into a cone. Then the cone is sort of closed. And he put a strip of metal inside to make the seam much stronger. So he solders a piece of strip inside. So at the joint, it's really, really strong. And the two cones are going to be then soldered together. So you put some bending wire out of steel to just hold the piece together. And then he's going to solder the joint. Adding little jump rings at the tip. And here's the piece after soldering. So through the inside, you just add a wire and with two jump rings at each end to be able to attach it to the chain. And those are little pieces that are going to be added to the necklace, but also some of them will become earrings. So when the piece is finished, it's really well cleaned with a brass brush and soap. And then it's ready for plating. So the plating, there's many steps into the plating. It's an art on its own. But it's all plated in 18 karat gold. And often plated first in nickel and then plated in gold, I believe. And then he's going to do another plating. It's called chai. So it's about getting a lot of steel pieces together with ammoniac and different other secret solution. You can see it here. And then it actually transformed the gold plating in an orange, more orangey look. So it's a shade. And here he's making his mixture and put it in when it's hot like that. And the necklace just turned orange. It's just this beautiful gold color, almost like a 22 karat gold. And this technique is used a lot in Senegal and in Mali. And here's the finished piece. Here is actually Modou introduced himself. And he came. And here is one of his teacher, actually a friend of his that used to teach him holding the finished piece. So anyway, this is a little introduction to few West African technique, but I really want to acknowledge that none of those could be done without all those fantastic jewelers, Mohammed, Bamba, Modou, Camo, and their willingness to share techniques to show how things are made in their part of the world. And so, yeah, I just wanted to really thank them for allow us to see that and to witness that beauty and that control of techniques. And so, thank you.
Thank you so much, Matthieu, for that amazing presentation. Now, everyone, we're going to be joined by Matthieu on the stage to have a Q&A that's going to be moderated by me. If you have any questions for Matthieu, please feel free to type them in the chat. I think there's like a 10-second delay or something between the platforms. But again, you can type them in the chat, or you can put them in the different forms of the chat. There's a few different chats. Here goes Matthieu, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, Matthew. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. And you? Thank you.
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. Your presentations were fabulous. I feel like they were super informative, like in different capacities. Um, Thank you so much. Sorry,
Well, thank you. I wish I could take any credit, but it all goes to the jewelers.
right? And I also appreciate them allowing you to kind of record and document their processes. I feel like for a long time, for a lot of people, some of these processes aren't always as transparent of how they're done. So that's amazing.
Yeah, I always was. I've always been blown away by the generosity of sharing those techniques all over West Africa, and it's been just a privilege. So just love it.
Got you. One question came from our from someone in the Q&A. It was Carrie Quick. She asked, "Can you tell us more about the artisanal village in Dakar? How is it organized and by whom?"
So there is in all the old French colonies, they always created artisanal village. So in many countries, Mali, Senegal, Togo, Benin, they always have a artisanal village. Niger, um, and now it's the Chamber of Art and Craft who are responsible for it, and they rent out. Shops to different artisans. So Tsumbidyun village, it's a beautiful one. It's really by the ocean, right next to a beautiful fish market, and so every little booth are rented out to different artisans. So leather working, stone carving, and anything you can imagine. It's a good way when I go to West Africa to start, because you meet somebody and then they introduce you to friends out of the village. So it's always a good place to go first. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. And I think viewers especially appreciated seeing sort of metalwork in a broad definition, like how it was incorporated into the saddles, but also thinking through how I think craft practices work or kind of happen collaboratively or within the same spaces. So that was powerful to see. I guess another question that might be like more like specific. I'm wondering, how do persons who are metalsmiths in West Africa become part of the Toolbox Initiative? Like, would they reach out to you via email, or is it a very specific process?
So far, it's really when we go and when we meet people. Um, so it's really the kind of a straight connection. So we meet a jeweler. Let's say we go to Senegal and we travel through the country, and everywhere we meet jewelers, then we give tools. And so sometimes they said, "Well, I have a friend in that village who probably needs some," so we'll go. So most of the time it's like that. And sometime in some country, like in Mali right now, it's hard to go above Bamako. Like if you go north of Bamako, it's a little bit risky. So sometimes we cannot get there. And so we have friends from Mali coming to meet us wherever we are, and we give tools, and they bring it to Tombouctou or to different places where we're not going. So we also use jewelers from different countries that meet us wherever we go, and they bring it to their friends and to their family. So that's how it works. But most of the time, it's really by meeting people.
Mm, that makes sense. And like meeting an individual might expand the network in a given area or region. That's powerful.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's amazing. Another question from Carrie Ann. What motivated you to move to Mali when you were 25? And how did you start jewelry in general? And I'm also curious, what made you, as like a as a person who's very familiar with the Southwest of America, what made you move to the Southwest at 19?
Okay, it's all yeah. Well, when I was 19, I never did very good in school, got kicked out of mini school in Paris, and I had a great aunt who was a painter in New Mexico. She was part of that Georgia O'Keeffe gang,
Gotcha.
and and so I went to visit her, and I just totally fell in love with Taos, and I met a girl from the Pueblo that her family were jewelers, so that's how I start to get into the jewelry there, and then meet other friends and people from the Navajo Nation, and learn like that in the Southwest for 7 years. And then I met another girl, uh, and my wife actually now, but she was going to go live with her mom in Mali. Her mom was a volunteer in Mali, and so I was supposed to go for a few weeks just because we just met, and I ended up staying 3 years with them. And my wife was going to school there, and so I will just walk the street and discover new things all the time.
Wow. It's a very full circle story, and it feels like all the sort of parts build into each other in some capacity.
Well, yeah, and I moved to Canada because my wife was from Canada and wanted to study here. So just, that's how it happened.
That makes perfect sense. And also, everyone who's watching, if y'all have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. But I guess also, how do you see your not just documentation of these practices, but really like observational participatory practices with these jewelers inform your own work? Like, are these the skills that you would use in like your own jewelry school that's in Canada? Or are these skills that you use in your own practice that you build upon? Could you elaborate more on that?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because there is a very fine line between using a technique and creating the same piece as people make, which I'm really staying away from that.
Yeah.
I think techniques are universal. I think the pieces are not, but the technique. And I'm interested into preserving the technique. For me, that's the most of it. To share, because I got the privilege to be able to witness those, and some of those are disappearing. But so my goal is to share, to show people how things are made,
Yeah.
but also to preserve those techniques for future generation in West Africa. We can see now in Mali, again, I was talking about like Emafa was showing those beautiful earrings from the Fulani, those gold earrings, and those are made in close to Djenné in Mali. And so there is few people who make them because it's a long process. But with what's going on with terrorist activity, those people don't have people to buy the earrings anymore. So I believe in couple generation, nobody is going to make those earrings. Maybe even one generation. So for me, it's really to preserve it so we can, younger people in West Africa, maybe in 20 years from now, one will want to make those earrings, but there is nothing left how they were made. So they can reach through books and movie to make them. So that's the idea, is really for the future generation to have those techniques behind. I think that's my goal.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess bridging off of that, in one of your videos, we saw like families working together and like young people from the families working together. Throughout your practice of like in the Toolbox Initiative, do you see a lot of people bringing in youth and youth being receptive to the work, or is it like people having to reach out beyond their family lines to sort of bring in youth to the work, or is that depending on the context?
It's still what depend. I mean, the Tuareg, it's you're born an Inadan, so you're born an artisans because you're part of that. I will use caste, but you're part of that group. You're born, and often you're going to marry someone from the same line, so another artisan. But more and more, I mean, we see it all over the world. Young kids, they don't want to spend so much time on one technique, so they want to go a little bit faster. Even we saw the Ifer1 cross. They used to be made in wax because there is like a 3D dimension to it. And the younger kid now, when you see them, they just cut the cross out, which it's beautiful because it has that engraving, but it doesn't have that 3D dimension because people wants to go faster and make more money. Of course, it's everywhere the same, but that's how techniques also disappearing slowly, I find.
That makes perfect sense. Wow, powerful. I guess also, do you see a question that we saw yesterday from one of the audience members that I think could apply here? Do you see artisans trying to incorporate new technologies into their practices, or for the most part, people really trying to stay true to what they've learned from generational practices?
I see new technology, and I think it's important to adapt to new technology everywhere around. I think it's very important to keep as much as possible the traditional techniques, but of course, I think it's important and a lot of our friends are using new technology in their work as well. And why not? It's very important, as long as, for me, it's really important to keep those tradition alive. And but I think more and more people are you have access to YouTube, you have access to Rio Grande catalog. You want to have access to all those new technology, and I think it's I will actually push it to do it.
That makes perfect sense. And I guess also, oh, yeah, it makes perfect sense. I feel like those were such great and thorough answers to the questions. And again, if anyone has any other questions, please feel free to type them in the chat. I just have a few more of my personal repertoire. I'm guessing if anyone ever wanted to sort of learn more about the initiative, it's a free platform, I imagine, to some degree. They just kind of go on the website and they view videos, or do they register for it? Could you describe the process of accessing the initiative in terms of the video series?
Yeah, we mostly use actually Facebook. We have a website, but we use Facebook, and we share what's going on and what we're doing. Lately, we've been mostly focusing, since the pandemic, we've been focusing on education. So we opened 5 schools since the pandemic. 3 schools for young girls, so they can learn French and math in Niger, and 1 leather school in Niger as well for women, and a jewelry school for boys.
Wow.
And so we're trying to focus more on education. I mean, we keep doing the tours, of course, because it's fantastic. And I mean, like, when if you look at Tuareg tools, they have the best tools. I have a couple Tuareg hammer and an anvil, and that's all I use now. So it's but still, yeah. So that's what we've been doing, that more and more.
That makes perfect sense. We've gotten a few questions in the chat now, Matthew. First, we have one from Munya. Matthew, are you able to get gold earrings out of the country to sell here?
Lately, they're not been made in gold. They're mostly made in bronze.
Yep.
Or silver, but there is very few little person who makes the big one. So you can find the small one, and more the young generation, they just take 2 pieces of metal that they solder together to do the wings instead of forging them. So it's a little bit different. And because the best place is Mali, so, and I'm not going to Mali lately, it's hard to bring some back right now.
It makes perfect sense.
But yeah, it's a fun process. It's a really beautiful process.
I believe I've seen some examples, so I can imagine seeing the process is like breathtaking.
I think there is a video on the YouTube channel about it.
Gotcha.
For the toolbox, and it's an ingot, and you spread the 4 wings by hammering it with like 3 or 4 different shaped hammer. It's really amazing.
Tanya Crane had a question in the chat as well. Matthew, is there a plan to bring some of the artisans from West Africa to the States for teaching opportunities, and also to build off the question, to possibly exhibit in different institutions, and also sorry.
I've been trying. I've been sponsoring a lot of friends, and unfortunately, they don't give the visa.
Wow.
So the tricky part is the visa. I mean, I will bring everyone to teach, but the visa are tricky. One of my friends from Agadez in Niger just got a visa, so he's going to come to Canada next May, I believe, and we'll organize some classes. But again, it's going to be hard for him to move to the States because of a visa thing. It's always about the visa, unfortunately.
Wow. That makes perfect sense. It's sad to hear that, though, that there's these sort of discrepancies that are kind of causing people to not have access to come abroad. That's messed up. But we have another question in the chat from Azita. Matthew, is there somewhere we can purchase the spotlit artist pieces?
Unfortunately, that's another tricky one. Once in a while, I bring pieces to sell so I can help them out. So when I have some, yes, it's possible. Um, but that's pretty much it. It's really tricky to the business part. Also, when I come back from Africa into Canada, I'm limited in how much I can bring back. So I could, I would love to bring a few kilos of jewelry to help, but it's often they check your luggage and you're allowed a certain amount of money. So it's a tricky one to do. Yeah.
Gotcha. Shania Crane also asks, is there a way for the institutions to help with the visa process? I know sometimes with Kate, also from building off of her question, I know sometimes with like when it comes to visas, when it comes to special talents and things of that nature, sometimes universities can make special cases for people to come abroad, especially when they have very specific skill sets that very few others can teach in the States or hip. But yeah,
Yeah, that would be fantastic, to be able to do that through a school. I
gotcha.
think
It's like,
also one of our ideas for the toolbox is to actually we brought people with the toolbox to give tools for a few times. Now I would like to organize workshop in Africa. So rent a place and have people come, and all the teacher will be either way from Senegal, Niger, Mali, and they will come and teach there. So that's another option. Instead of bringing the teacher here, we'll bring the students there because of the visa thing.
that makes sense. I think it's probably just an institution expressing interest, right? So that makes sense. So yeah, a professor of metalsmithing who's interested in sort of doing that work would be great. That makes perfect sense. But also thinking through building the work or doing the educational section in Africa itself, that makes sense as well as a way of sort of creating like a symbiotic relationship in some ways of exchange.
Yeah, and with Mohamed Ajida in Niger, we were talking to, like since the pandemic, a lot of people do class online. And so I'm trying to figure how I can organize class online with Tuareg jewelers or other jewelers. So this way they could teach all over the world, but online and make a good income from it. So that's also another idea behind it. Yeah.
Yeah. Those kind of virtual skill-based workshops are doing really well, so that makes a lot of sense. We
Yeah.
have a few more questions, and then well, not transfer. We'll have a few more questions, and then we'll transition into the break. Um, and also, yes, thank you so much for your time, Matthew. But
Yeah.
from Sherry Cordova, you mentioned opening 3 schools in Niger for girls and the new school for boys to learn metalwork. Is there any plan to teach girls metalwork?
There is always a plan to teach girls metalwork. Unfortunately, most of the country in West Africa, francophone, I'm going to say, are very little women jewelers.
Mm,
There is some in Togo. There is quite a lot in Togo, and we're always pushing for that. In Senegal, there is a jewelry school where there is a lot of girls now learning that. In Niger, everybody's open for it. So the jewelry school for boys, we have few girls who joined, and we're trying to push, but at the same time, we don't want to push and go behind uh, the culture or the I just let people decide, really.
makes sense. Um, gotcha. That makes perfect sense. I guess also to build off of that, what was your process for contacting jewelers? Was it very when you were on the continent of Africa? Was it a very organic process? Like did it kind of happen just kind of randomly, or was it more so like very like you heard a very specific person, you sought that person out kind of thing?
Both. Most of it is always very organic. It's walking the street, you meet someone, you sit.
Wow.
Um, as soon as you tell them you're a jeweler, you're part of the family. So they might sit you down and give you a hammer and a piece of silver and to forge a ring to just make sure you're a jeweler. Uh, but then it's so organic, and anywhere I went in West Africa, the generosity has been mind blowing.
Wow.
Always, when I moved to Mali, I didn't have much money at all, and I could sit with some jeweler for months, never ask for one thing, give you meal every day, tea. It's just unbelievable. And I think the Toolbox initiative for me was kind of a response to that generosity, to just that level of sharing and openness is never seen before. I mean, West Africa is magical for that. It's just all of Africa. I'm just talking West because that's, but there's something quite special in that. If somebody walk into your shop tomorrow, you'd be like, well, I don't know if I can show you that. I'm working on my own stuff, but over there, people stop everything they're doing to show you whatever all the time. It's just, yeah. I mean, even after all those years, every trip blows my mind.
That makes sense. One of our viewers named Judy, suggested taking a group of women maybe to see work being done around different spaces without it necessarily being a hands-on workshop in some capacity. But that might be something further down the pipeline. But maybe the last question we'll take before we bridge into break. Carrie Quick asks, what are you working on now, Matthieu? Is it another book? What do you have planned for the future? And also, where do you see the initiative going? I think you kind of touched on it somewhat, but a more specific answer to that would be great too.
Yeah, so right now I'm working on a new book on chain making. So I'm trying to, again, it's to preserve techniques. I mean, to me, that's so important. And at the Industrial Revolution, chain were start to be made by machine.
Yeah.
And so most of the chain are machine made. And so I'm trying to, and Tim McRae is publishing the book. I'm trying to get at least 100 different chain and show the step-by-step process of them in the book. And it's we already have over 60, almost 70 chain. So it's coming along well, but it's fantastic. I didn't like making chain before. I like big stuff, but I'm just taken by it. It's really fascinating. So that's what I'm doing for the toolbox. We're going to start traveling more and more. Unfortunately, I was supposed to go this month to Niger, but they had a coup, so I'm going to wait a little bit. And in January, we're going to go through Senegal to meet friends from Niger and different things like that. Often we go to Senegal because it's an easy place to go and we meet people from other country. Yeah, so that's the plan. But yeah, a new book for now, and yeah, working on jewelry.
Makes perfect sense. Thank you so much for your time, Matthieu, and thank you so much for, I think, illustrating to us like this very transnational practice of documenting jewelers and exposing broader audiences to their practices and the very specific elements of their techniques. We really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you for doing that.
Anytime. Thank you and have a great rest of your day. So yeah, I'm gonna put you off. I'm gonna bridge into break. Thank you, Matthieu.
Thank you so much.
So everybody, yep. We're gonna bridge into a 15-minute break or so. So we'll meet back here around 3:20 Eastern time. Thank you so much to Matthieu Cheminée again for his amazing presentations and also for taking questions and really exposing us to a broad range of practices around West Africa in terms of their materiality and also in terms of their fabrication processes. So again, we're going to reconvene here on stage at around 2:20 or so, 3:20 so Eastern time, so 15 minutes or so. I'm going to bridge into the slide for the break time. And thank you again, Matthieu. And please check out one of his upcoming projects, which is going to be the chain making book. But also in the meantime, there is a book through Schiffer which you can purchase around Matthieu exploring Tuareg artisans. Thank you all so much, and we'll look forward to seeing you all soon after break. Thank you.